DNA Clarity and Support. I'm your host, Brianne. Listen as I chat with authors and leaders in the DNA world about the family and personal impacts of DNA testing. You'll hear news stories, unique perspectives, find out about books, websites, organizations, other podcasts for those involved in the world of DNA. Please be sensitive to younger listeners as the conversations can get intense at times. This is a production of Watershed DNA. Learn more at watersheddna.com. Welcome back to the DNA Clarity and Support podcast, Arnold. I'm very happy that you've decided to come back and answer more of my questions and questions from the listeners.
Thank you for inviting me back again. It's been interesting thinking since we discussed this back in December and waiting for the next episode to begin. So I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. I had anticipated questions and hearing from listeners after your episode because we were able to cover a lot of parts of your story, but not all of them. And your story is very interesting for those who haven't had a chance to listen to our first conversation. Short story is approximately 6 years ago, you did a DNA test looking for information about your ancestry and unexpectedly matched an unknown biological daughter who had been raised by adoptive parents. And she was not someone that you even knew existed until you actually was when you did your second DNA test. She popped up as a close match, as a daughter match to you. And since then, you have gotten to know her. She doesn't live close by, but you have had, is it 2 meetings in person at this point?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, actually 4.
4 in-person meetings.
4 in the past 6 years of this discovery.
And that last meeting included your children who you raised. You have a son and a daughter that you raised with your wife.
Yes, that is correct.
And your wife has since passed, but she was able to meet your biological daughter one time?
Yes, she passed away in September of 2020, and we had met in May of 2020, and she did get to meet her. Since my wife passed, I really can't speak and understand exactly why my wife was as graceful as she was. Probably a rare case, but you know, in the beginning, your lessons that we talked about and you advising me that I had done nothing wrong because I didn't know about it. So therefore, I needed not to feel apologetic because of it. But at the same time, you and I then, we talked about how do I tell my wife? And her response for the new listeners, my wife's response was, well, this happened before we were even married and before we even had children. And she said, so what's the problem? She was a wonderful woman. She made it very easy, and you had guided me with your recommendations and suggestions in our talks. And I was really taken back with how she replied. And I was prepared for it because of our conversation. So anybody that's new to a discovery, your best advice was, you're not alone, Arnold. You are one of many cases, and life will go on.
Yeah. I remember those conversations in those first 2 weeks. You had just found out about your bio daughter and hadn't shared with your wife yet, but you wanted to, but just we're still really in like the shock phase and not really being sure that it wasn't a mistake and wanting to make sure that you had the facts straight before.
And I can understand people having the same reaction that I had. Is it really true? Am I really the father? And the only way to do it is with DNA testing. And as we discussed last episode, that I did a third test, a parental test, not just a DNA test. And the parental test confirmed it without a doubt. And that allowed me to begin to do the healing and the preparation for telling my wife and then meeting my biological daughter. Trust me, anybody that's listening, get yourself a counselor. You were absolutely instrumental in helping me, and I've thanked you 100 times, and I'll continue to thank you for offering something like this. And I'm sure there's probably many more that have come out and assisting people, but you were wonderful.
Well, I'm glad that I could be there at the right time for you. And I will say you have put in a lot of work. You put in a lot of effort and have really shown the desire to have it turn out well for everybody and being really thoughtful for everyone in your family, including the children you raised and your biological daughter. And that I want to switch over to a question that came in after your first episode, because we didn't have a lot of time to dig into just how that process of sharing the news with the children you raised about surprise half-sister that they have. And someone wrote in asking the question, I would like to know from Arnold if his two children have a relationship with his biological daughter. So it would be their genetic half-sister to this day currently. And we started to talk a little bit about that first time meeting, but didn't get into the details. And I wonder if you could share a little bit more about how it came to be that your children you raised came to meet their half-sister. And I guess like how much planning went into it, where did the meeting happen, how did it turn out, and like where are things now?
With my wife passing, we had discussed that we were not sure when, if, and how to tell our son and daughter. The fears of my daughter's drug dependency that she had just gotten over with, that we were worried that it could cause her to have a relapse, which thankfully in the outcome it didn't. But that was the leading decision that my wife and I decided not to tell the children, that it was not the correct or appropriate at this time, and that we would deal with it after taking care of our daughter's issues first. So we did not tell the children. I did tell two family members that I confided with because I needed to tell someone. So the following year after the discovery, and after, I think it would be 6 or 7 months before she passed away, that she came to meet us, and she got to meet us. So after my wife passed away the following year, my own feelings were, is it time? How do I do this? How do I tell my children? And trying to be prepared for what they may say. We were celebrating one of my grandchildren's birthdays, and not quite sure how the subject came about with, and I'm sure it has to do with my daughter has two daughters by two different fathers. So the subject came about, half brothers, half sisters, and somehow or another the conversation led to my real biological daughter, our biological daughter, stating that, it probably wouldn't be such a bad idea if she had a sister, that she had never had a sister. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I maybe this announcement at the right time might not be such a bad thing, and it might just go okay. So I kind of changed the atmosphere and the questioning to get away from it, because we were celebrating my grandson's birthday, and that wasn't the time. So in the course of, the next couple of months, I kept thinking about it, and then the years went past, and still, is it right? Is it not right? Daughter was doing good with the two granddaughters, and she had turned her life around, and I had finally said, okay, well, let's figure out how we can do this. And I contacted my biological daughter, and asked her thoughts and her opinions, because not only now do I have to worry about my own children, our children, and their reaction to this discovery, but also the new biological daughter. Her parents actually had 2 adopted daughters. I don't know the whole story. They couldn't have children or what, but they adopted 2 daughters because they wanted the one sister to have another sister. And I wanted her opinion on when and if and how and what effect it might have on her. A lot of her family members and friends that she grew up with when she was in college and with her job, her friends and a lot of her friends and family don't know that she was adopted. So we have to do this to where we know that it's not going to cause her any problems. So we both agreed that social media was out. We don't broadcast. We don't talk about it once we decide to do it. So we talked numerous times about when, if, and how to do it. And she ultimately ended up right at almost, it would have been just over 6 years that she came back to town, and we decided to set up a meeting. When she got here, we both agreed that it was time. Then it falls back on me. How do I prepare to tell my children? And I came to the decision that what I would do was I would print a bunch of pictures that she had sent to me while she was growing up. Not so much at birth, but, like early, below 10 years old, and then 10, in junior high school and high school. And after the fact, I printed a bunch of those pictures to have it ready for discussion with our 2 children. Set up a family meeting. They showed up, told them that I had a secret that I've been waiting for the right time. And I said, please let me finish talking and then I will answer any of your questions. So I printed these pictures and I just came right out and said that before your mother passed away, I found out that I had a daughter that I never knew about, a biological daughter that was born and I never knew of before I even met your mother and got married. And of course, their eyes opened up really, really big, especially my daughter.
You probably recognize that shock that...
Yeah, I could see her reaction more than my son. I think because Daddy's little girl now isn't really Daddy's first little girl. But at the same time,
it maybe had a bigger impact on your daughter you raised because it's somehow like changing her role in the family, or...
Yeah, I think I was worried that it would change our relationship between, it might not really change it, but it might affect it. My son, because of being a boy and, okay, so Dad had a baby that he didn't know about. My son, I could see his reaction was not like my daughter's reaction. And I showed them the pictures and I said, this is her growing up. This is her at her sister's wedding. This is, years later. And then here is a picture with your mother and I meeting her. And I said, I would like very much to set up, a meeting. She's told me that she's going to come to town and I would like for her to come here to our house. And
how much time was that between when you shared with your son and daughter you raised and then the time that your biological daughter came to town?
March, April, May, June. I'll say maybe 4 months.
4 months?
Maybe 4 months in between. And as we got closer and closer to it, I planned a meeting that I was going to have, dinner here at the house. And the news actually went very well. And then I'll get to the other part in a second. But my daughter, she reacted like she was stunned. She was not mad or upset, but she was questioning why Mom and I decided not to tell them.
So it was not so much about the existence of a new sibling. It was the fact that there had been some secrecy around that.
Yeah, and trying to explain our reasoning for doing it, I think, because we explained to her that we were thinking of her more than any of the three of the kids. How is this going to affect you? It could have turned out bad, but it didn't. And I said, we decided it wasn't the right time. And then, by the grace of God, your mother passed away, and I have lived with this for the last 5 years, trying to decide. I didn't want to go to my grave when my time was coming and not tell them about her. I would rather that you hear it from me, and now would be the time to do it. So it actually went over the meeting. When we actually had the meeting, it was very cordial. They all got along very well. She was able to take pictures with her new stepbrother and her new stepsister, and then my daughter and her new half-sibling sister. They went on the back porch, and I let them go have their personal time. And they sat out there and talked for over an hour. And then we had dinner, and we said our goodbyes. We all agreed that there would be no social media posting of pictures or stories, but they all shared their phone numbers, and they still are in contact with each other, not as regularly as I am, which is understandable, but they still do connect. And, they ask me when they see me, when we have dinner or I see them, they ask me if I've heard from her. And then, of course, I ask them if they have had contact with her. It was a relief to finally have it out in the open. And I wish my wife had been here I don't think it would have made it any easier. I think it just happened that it was the right time. And everybody that goes through this, they all have to decide for themselves when the time is right. And it worked out for me as best as I could have ever expected.
That's a question that I got from a listener too, was didn't keeping the secret of your surprise child for 6 years make it more stressful?
Oh, it made it very stressful on me. And I don't know that it had anything to do with my ultimately having triple bypass heart surgery. In fact, the third DNA test, I had got the results back the night before I went in for open heart surgery. And I actually called my new biological daughter and told her that I'm getting ready to go in under anesthesia, and hopefully the surgery goes well and I wake up and life will continue. But the stress, dealing with the stress of this discovery and triple bypass heart surgery and coming home and sitting on the couch all day and playing it in my mind over and over and over again, trying to recall if I recalled her mother and I don't. At that time, it was 43 years before, and I didn't do a lot of good things when I came back from the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And that stress, plus the stress of a daughter, and how do you tell your wife, and how do you tell your children, it was very stressful. And I can understand anybody else that is saying that they're stressing it out, because it is very stressful, and you have to make sure that you take care of yourself for the time when you're going to make this be known to other people.
Would it be accurate to say that it was consuming your thoughts for some time?
I would dare say that of all of the things that were going on at the time, even with my recovering, the number one thing that stayed at the top of the list was, me trying to plan if and when I get to see her. Okay, I've seen pictures and the family resemblance. once we shared pictures, there was no doubt that she was my biological daughter.
There was family, physical.
She resembles she actually reminded me of a couple of family members. So to say it was at the top of my list of emotions on the roller coaster ride, as we talked about, yes, it was at the very top of the list.
I want to ask a question that came in from someone who was the biological daughter in a scenario similar to yours. So the question from her was related to her making the decision to turn off her family matching once she discovered a new biological father. And she wrote in, "My bio dad has said that I ghosted him because I hid my DNA results on Ancestry. Do you know if Arnold has similar feelings? My bio dad consistently tells me that if I want to reach out, that he will be there, but he will not reach out to me. Did Arnold feel the same way?"
Yes, and I fully understand the guilt feelings and the ghosting feelings. My first test was through Ancestry.com, and I never noticed or paid attention to the button in the top right that said, "Share my DNA with other people" on Ancestry.com. So I never turned it on. So I never had to deal with the ghosting, as the viewer mentioned. But when I did the second test through 23andMe, I did notice in the top right-hand side that it said, "Share your DNA testing." And because I did not know of the discovery of my bio, I turned it on. And I would say maybe 2 or 3 days might have gone by. And lo and behold, through the messaging program, I got this message from my bio daughter saying, "Hi, you showed up as a potential match for me, that you may be my biological father." And boy, did the emotions and the stress level jump to a whole new level. I immediately took the mouse and went up to the point and turned off the DNA. It's like I was in shock. Yes, I turned it off. So might have been 2 or 3 days later that I went back and I turned it back on, and there was a second message from my new bio daughter that said, "Oh, I guess I really put you in shock because I couldn't help but notice that you turned off your shared DNA." And she said, "Are you okay with this?" And then lo and behold, while I'm online, another message popped up and said, "So does that mean that we're okay to talk?" It kind of broke the ice and made it easy. But at the same time, it was like sharing that DNA. Really, if I had never turned it on, I probably would have never known about her. And after we discussed it, she was happy that I turned it back on. She said, "You could have easily just left it turned off and I would have never found you." Well, I think she probably could have, but she said, I would have never done it if you turned it off, because that would have been a signal that you didn't want nothing to do with me. And at the same time, after we met, she told me the same thing. She goes, "I could have ghosted you just as easily. When you turned it off, I could have turned it off, and neither one of us would have ever known." So the ghosting, yes, I did it, and I fully understand what she's saying. I think the only advice is that if you flipped out and now you're back, and if you turn it back on, and how their relationship has happened since, it would be nice if she replies back now to say that hopefully they haven't just moved on and forgot about each other. But I know that it happens. You and I have talked about it. A lot of people don't they don't want anything to do with their adopted or their biological children that they never knew about. And it's a very good question. And yes, I ghosted her. She could have ghosted me, but neither one of us didn't. And I'm even today, 6.5, going up the 7th year, and I am okay with it. I'm glad that I left it turned on. I've since removed my DNA from both of the sites because I don't need. If there's another one that might be there, is there a possibility that there's another one there? Absolutely. I don't need to deal with another one with my other health issues that are going on and lessons that I've learned. If you don't know, you've done nothing wrong. And to this day, I have no recollection of her mother or me. And I've thought many times, based on conversations, I don't think her mother knew who I was either. You know, she told her daughter when they met 20 years later, when she found her mother, that she didn't know who I was. She doesn't remember who I was. She remembered I came home from Vietnam. But I think she knew more, or maybe she didn't, because I don't. But ghosting happens a lot from what I've talked to other people that have had the same discovery.
So you've answered one of the questions that came in from a listener, which was Arnold seems to waffle between wishing he never took the second test and being glad that he did. How does he feel now? And it sounds like at this point, you're glad that you did and that you decided to opt back in and connect with your bio daughter. Do you still waffle?
No, I do not. I think after meeting her the first time with my wife, I actually had my stress level had come down. After meeting with our 2 children and her, the waffling, I think, went away. If I could give anybody advice about waffling is a natural reaction to trying to decide if you're happy or you're not, if you want to do it or you don't. That waffling can go back and forth. And if I could give anybody any advice, I would say, if you've had contact, and I think one of the viewers said that they have had some contact, but not enough. If you've had contact via emails, text messages, or maybe even a video phone call, I think the best advice that I could give anybody was meeting face to face, I think, is what erased the waffling effect. You know, seeing a picture, yeah, you see this or you see that, you know, the eyes, the nose, the chin. But because of her family that raised her, there's a lot of differences. But meeting face to face, I think, probably was the number one antidote to the waffling effect. I don't regret the waffling, and I'm glad that I don't have that waffling effect anymore. So if you get to the point that if the waffling bothers you badly, then take the next step and meet face to face. Once you meet face to face, the 2 of you, even after I met her face to face, she still could have said, okay, you know, this ain't going to work. And I could have done the same thing. But I think it was like I said, it was the antidote that I needed to get over that emotional roller coaster.
I want to read a comment that a listener sent in because it's on this same topic. So they wrote in, I had an opportunity to listen to Arnold's podcast. I really got a lot out of it. The biggest aha moment for me was the idea that it can take time to work up to meeting with extended family. I have felt so guilty about not being ready. So your thoughts on the feelings of guilt about not being ready?
I don't think that I had guilt about not being ready. I think it takes time for you as the biological parent to sort through it. And just like I did when I finally was ready to tell the children, I printed those pictures. So you have to take time in order to figure out, and I won't say the best time or the correct time. I'll just say, when is the time to tell? But I don't think that I ever felt guilty because I took so much time. I'm sure if my wife had not passed away, that it wouldn't have taken me 5 years after her passing to finally come to a decision. And even before my wife passed away, I'll let on that my mother passed away on her 90th birthday. And when I went into Ancestry.com looking for answers, the old phrase, be careful what you go looking for, because you may get a surprise that you weren't prepared for. But my mother took a secret to her grave that none of my siblings or half siblings that her and my stepfather had, we never knew that my mother had been married before she married my father. And that was probably the number one deciding factor that I said, I cannot tell my children. I cannot tell my wife. That was the deciding factor. But
because you knew what it felt like. It sounds like because you knew what it felt like to be on the end of a really important secret had been kept from you, from someone you really trusted or someone that you had expected, and you didn't want to.
And I didn't want to
do that to somebody
I didn't want to carry that family tradition of secrets any further.
Yeah.
And it was, the guilt never played a part, but at the same time, if I'm going to do this, when the time is right, you have to make sure that you have prepared yourself as best you can on how to respond when you do meet and when you tell your other children, if you have other children involved, because you have to think about your biological child, you have to think about your children, you have to think about yourself, but it does take time, and only you can decide when the time is right. One of the other things that played into deciding the right time is because the good thing is when I found the discovery about my mother, that she had been married, but I discovered that he had passed away, and apparently there were no other siblings involved. I had two stepbrothers that are not even in the picture, but at the same time, stepchildren don't get along as well as natural born whole brothers and sisters, if you understand what I'm saying.
In your experience, in your family.
In my experience, it seems. And even though my dad had gotten remarried after my mom and dad got divorced, my three siblings on my dad's side of the family, 2 out of 3 and I don't have a very good relationship. And on the other side, my mother's 2 boys that she had, I have no relationship with them. So when you decide the time is right, you have to be prepared. You have to, the old phrase, you have to have your ducks in a row, and you have to make sure that all the trees in the forest are lined up. If you've got one that you don't know about, you have to be prepared for the response. But back to the point of the question, it does take time, and you have to make sure that you think about it from all sides. But I would highly recommend that you talk to a counselor and you get advice. And I'm sure that there's plenty other counselors like yourself that would probably do the same thing. You know, they would tell you the same thing. The time will be right when you feel it's right. And I felt it was right. I felt that, okay, it's time. And I don't regret waiting. And again, if my wife hadn't passed, it wouldn't have taken 5 years. Mm-hmm. My daughter said something to me after the meeting that really struck with me. It's like, well, I really wish that you and Mom would have told us, and then I could have made my own decision. Mom's not here, so I can't talk to Mom to hear Mom's response and see Mom's face telling me that she was okay with it. So I'm taking your word that she was. And I said, well, if you look at the pictures, your mother met her. So, timing is absolutely, you have to pick the time.
So one listener was curious about the geographical distance between you and your biological daughter and then your children that you raised. Has that had any influence, do you think, on either how quickly relationships built? Did the geographical distance make any difference in your mind?
For me, no, because mine is 6 plus, I'll say 7 states between us. If the geographics was in the same town or the same state, I think it might have had a different impact. I've had many people have told me that they saw me in a town 35 miles from where I live now. And to say, oh, I saw you in whatever town it is. I saw you the other day over there. And I said, no, that wasn't me.
You have a doppelganger, perhaps?
It says, no, this guy, you sure you weren't there? And I said, no, if I was, I would tell you that I was, but I wasn't there. So everybody has someone, or you have a family member. In fact, you see somebody, and I think if you were in the same town, you might see somebody's you see a resemblance to you or your sister or your brother, and you say, wow, is that Arnold? No, but it looks like him. I recently found some pictures of my wife when she was a child, when she was 10 years old. And I printed those pictures and I put them next to a picture of my daughter, my real daughter, our daughter, when she was 10. And when my youngest granddaughter, who's 10 now, I put her picture next to my wife when she was 10. And grandma and granddaughter, it's, I tell you what, so if your geographical was close enough, your discovery might happen sooner. So I think the distance between us probably made it a lot easier, without a doubt.
Well, I could talk to you all day long because I think you have such an interesting life story. There's so many different aspects of your life, and this is really just your DNA surprise story is just one of many chapters that you could write in your memoir. But thank you for coming on and answering more of my questions from listeners. And I do look forward to hearing how the relationship between your children and your bio daughter develop over time. So perhaps that will be another conversation in the future. Thanks again. Are there any parting words that you have for families that are very new in this discovery of a child that they didn't know existed?
If you're single, it's a lot easier, I think, with the discovery and trying to decide what to do. When you're married, it has different ramifications and issues that have to be thought out. You have to think about before you react. And the best advice is to reach out. Find a counselor that you can talk to, somebody that you can confide with, and then look and see if there's a group in town that meets regularly that you might want to join. I think it's very helpful to talk to someone who has been through it, that will reassure with you that you're going to get through this. But the most important advice that you gave to me that I will share with people If you're finding this out, you have no reason to be upset. You have done nothing wrong. Women who get pregnant and decide that they, for the better of the child, decide to give the child up. The father should know, but unfortunately, he does not know. Would it have changed anything in my life? I can't answer that because I hadn't met my wife. So I don't know, and I don't play the what if game anymore. I stopped playing the what if game. But get some advice, talk to a counselor, and if you can find a group to join a group, I think it would be very helpful.
Excellent parting words. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bree.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DNA Clarity and Support. This is Brianne, founder of Watershed DNA. Check out the show notes for information discussed in today's episode and head over to watersheddDNA.com to sign up for our email list. Never miss out on notification of new resources available in the world of DNA testing.